Welcome to Random But Memorable, a podcast from 1Password. I'm Sarah, one of the founders at 1Password.
I'm Rue, head of password manager development.
I'm Matt Davey, 1Password's chief experience officer.
I'm Anna, the producer behind the show.
And we're the hosts behind Random But Memorable. Together, we offer up bi-weekly security advice, interview special guests from the cybersecurity community, and round up the latest in security news with Watchtower Weekly. We may even play a silly security game or two. So sit back and enjoy the show.
So how much computer games are we actually going to play? Like, is it...
Yeah.
It's a lot, right?
It's a lot, yes. Like, I was thinking of moving the PS5 up to the main floor so I don't have to be a basement troll for extended periods of time. At least play games with some natural light around. But yes, like, I'm just going to be on Helldivers, I think, all the hours that I'm not working.
Because I've got tomorrow and we've both got Friday off, it being a wellness day. So,
yes, that's correct.
I'm excited for you.
And there's $10 for ice cream. I don't know who came up with this thing.
This new thing.
Like, we have an automatic card distributor that gives people money. I don't know how it works. Finance. Waves hands.
Yeah, finance.
And for some reason, someone decided that we all get ice cream on Friday.
It's incredible. Listen, there's been a few programs that have been kicked off recently, like the wellness days. Wonderful. Absolutely love it.
Is this someoe's job? How do I get this job?
It is.
Yes, it is someone's job to just think of, like, cool stuff that we get to have.
And you get a car, and you get a car.
It is phenomenal. Like, when we did Doughnut Day, we had people sending pictures of donuts. I've never seen so many donuts in my life. Like, everybody loved it. And it's just a way easier way to engage with people. It's a more useful spend of the dollars. Like, you're just being a better corporate human on top of getting to have more fun. So I love my swag and I love all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, this is way easier to roll out with like 1,400 people.
It gave me a view of how popular Biscoff is around the world. That was my takeaway from Doughnut Day.
There's
a lot of Biscoff flavours.
What's a Biscoff?
It's like a caramelly biscuit.
And on that note, let's welcome our audience back to our new season.
Oh, yeah, welcome to season 27 of Random But Memorable.
Nice.
Oh, man.
So apparently this is the first section of the new show, which is From the Vault. So we're going to share something. I think we've already done it, to be honest. I think we've talked about Doughnut Day and an ice cream day, which is what's new at 1Password. We've also launched a bunch of new fixes for stuff, which is my favourite blog posts when these go out are hey, all those things that you were complaining about, we've knocked them all off a big task list.
Yeah, if you haven't seen that 6 things in 1 minute and 60 seconds, it's a great video. That video is fire, as the kids would say.
Also, we recently released Wi-Fi QR codes, and this feature that was a small feature that Andrew German, one of our developers, cooked up, it blew up. Like, talk about a dark horse feature that just, like, really resonated with people. I couldn't believe it. People were over the moon for this thing. Very, very cool. So you can now, if you store your Wi-Fi details in 1Password, we will now show a QR code for that. And if you have guests over, they can just scan that QR code and it just instantly connects them to your Wi-Fi network. You don't have to be like, oh, the name is this, and yeah, the password's this, but it's got spaces in it and some of it's capped. Like, you don't have to do any of that stuff. It's just like, here, scan this and you'll be online. It's really, really great.
I like it. I like it a lot.
Agreed. So we did find some stuff in the vault.
We did. And Anna's left a joke here, but it's a terrible one. I'm sorry, Anna.
I don't understand it still. I'm still trying.
Really?
I don't.
The S in IoT stands for security, and there is no S in IoT. It's funnier because I have to explain it. That's what I think.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's a dumb joke.
Okay.
That's a good one. I guess I could probably tease the guest. So it's exciting to kick off a new season of the show, and we couldn't be kicking it off with a better guest, as we have Joseph Cox joining us later on in the show. He's unpacking his new book, Dark Wire, which is an incredible true story of the largest sting operation ever using an encrypted messaging app called Anam. I definitely recommend sticking around for that one if you fancy going on a wild roller coaster ride through underground FBI operations and the wider debates around encryption. This was a super fun interview. I really enjoyed sort of learning about all of this stuff and hearing some real stories from out in the world. But we should probably start with a little bit of Watchtower Weekly. Matt, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, let's get to Watchtower Weekly, where we like to round up some of the latest cybersecurity news and comment on headlines or stories that have caught our eye lately. And this week's first story comes from Apple News, and it's a big one, so I'd be surprised if this one passed you by. It is likely the biggest ever password leak of nearly 10 billion credentials. Every time we see a post like this come through, and it's like 10 billion credentials, 20 billion credentials, they are basically cumulative, right? They can't be brand new credentials each time, surely.
I don't know. The way that this is framed, no, there's got to be overlap.
Yeah, the previous one was 8.4 billion, and that was known as RockU 2021. I'm guessing that this is not net new 10 billion passwords.
I feel like it's like whoever did this and then the Moab, the mother of all breach thing, they just take all of that and then the next person's like, okay, well, I'm going to add. It's like the blockchain of password leaks. Like I take your password leaks and I add some more onto it and look, it's bigger and it becomes the biggest in the world. But they can't be new every single time.
No, I don't think so. So, on July 4th, a newly registered user on a popular hacking forum posted a file containing nearly 10 billion compromised passwords in plain text. At that point, isn't it just the dictionary in every combination that they could possibly make? So Christmas came early this year. User Obamacare wrote on a forum, I present you with RockU 2024 password list with over 9.9 billion passwords. Cybersecurity researchers are calling it the largest password compilation leak of all time. I think that gives us our answer. The gigantic list of leaked passwords, known as RockU 2024, provides hackers with an important tool that can be utilized in a brute force attack. If you're at the bottom of this list, it's as if there is no list. and the brute force is just picking at random almost, I imagine. A brute force attack is a popular hacking method where attackers guess a user's password by trial and error. Hackers commonly use automated scripts when carrying out a brute force attack, which enables them to try out a slew of passwords within a short amount of time. With a leaked password database this big, hackers have a nearly unlimited pool of passwords to try out. Cyber News researchers have commented on the leak, saying, in its essence, the RockU 2024 leak is a compilation of real-world passwords used by individuals all over the world. Revealing that many passwords for threat actors substantially heightens the risk of credential stuffing attacks. As Cyber News researchers also point out, this list may very well be the largest password leak ever, beating the previous holder known as RockU 2021, which had around 8.4 billion passwords. In fact, the hacker forum user Obamacare claims they used that older list and updated it with newer password leak data from over the past 3 years. As a result, 1.5 billion more passwords have been added to the previous compilation, and I imagine that person's fingers ache from copy and paste so much. I shouldn't laugh at my own jokes. This next one. Disney's internal Slack was leaked by hackers mad about AI.
Ooh.
There's so many keywords in that. So over a terabyte of data supposedly obtained from Disney's internal messaging channels have been leaked online by a self-proclaimed hacktivist group, including login credentials, code, images, and information about unreleased projects. The anonymous group, calling itself Null Bulge. Oh, that's a 3 out of 10. That's a hard no.
No.
They've claimed responsibility for the leak, alleging to have gained access to the company's Slack messaging data via the compromised computer of a Disney employee. Anything we could get our hands on, we downloaded and packaged up, the group said on X. Are we really calling it X? Have we just generally as society, have we agreed that yet?
No.
I think we may have. I mean,
maybe
No.
we're over.
I still call it Twitter, but I
Claiming to have obtained 1.1 terabyte of files and chat messages from almost 10,000 corporate Disney Slack channels. They have a bigger Slack problem than we do. 10,000 channels? Are you kidding me? Oh. Sorry, that's completely thrown me off. Like,
that's wild.
How would you even... Do you know how many we have? How many do we have? We've got like too many already.
Like if you think there's food services there's hotel services, there's animation, there's TV shows, there's producers. Like if each show has its own channel, then there's the HR, there's the payroll. Like, oh, I can see how that bloat gets there real fast.
Yeah. Yep.
People
I don't
talk.
know how many we
People
have.
talk a
It
lot.
doesn't let me see. Not 10,000, that's for sure.
No. But also, we're 1,400 people compared to Disney's 14,000 or whatever it is. Like, it's, yeah.
So, Null Bulge alluded to the possession that...
Can you stop saying that, please?
It's the hacking group name. I can't
So
not
you can
say
just
it.
say the hacking group name.
No.
Null Bulge alluded to possessing the stolen data on July 12th, hours prior to leaking Disney's Slack archive. The Wall Street Journal reports the files contain internal Disney conversations about software development, recruitment, website maintenance, and employee programs dating back to at least 2019. According to Eurogamer, details regarding an upcoming gaming collaboration and unannounced video game sequels obtained via leaked files have also started emerging online. Nullbulge says its goal is to protect artists' rights and compensation, telling the Wall Street Journal it had targeted Disney due to how it handles its artist contracts, its approach to AI, and its pretty blatant disregard for the consumer. I mean, do they have a wildly different perspective on this than any other movie studio or brand like Disney?
Yeah.
This seems like an opportunistic thing that turned into a post-justification.
Sorry, I'm trying to process like what they thought.
It is early in the morning, dear, don't worry.
Like, what did they? Why? What does this have to do with AI?
I'm just trying to process what's happening.
Yeah, no, it's like we're mad about AI, so we're going to take all of their chat messages.
Yeah, I don't get the link.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Almost every Apple device is vulnerable to the CocoaPods supply chain attack. This one was pretty terrifying. So this story is reporting that CocoaPods, a open source dependency manager used in over 3 million applications in Swift and Objective-C, left thousands of packages exposed and ready for takeover for nearly a decade, thereby creating opportunities for supply chain attacks in iOS and Mac apps. And this is, of course, according to security researchers who have done this information. So the Israeli firm Eva Information Security announced its discovery in a recent blog post. Eva claims that CocoaPods in 2014 migrated all of their pods, a file describing the project's dependencies, to a new trunk server on GitHub. That migration saw authorship of all the pods reset, and the authors asked to reclaim their work. Some didn't, and at the time of writing, 1,870 pods remain unclaimed by their owners, leaving them orphaned and accessible. So all orphaned pods were affiliated with a default email address, and a public API for claiming unclaimed pods was available until late 2023, with no need to provide any verification of ownership. So to claim a pod, all an attacker needed to do was transmit a particular curl request, and voila, they would have free reign to modify a pod and insert malicious code. Eva's researchers wrote that they haven't seen evidence of this mess being exploited, but given the billion-plus iOS devices in use, and the fact that apps from Meta, Apple, Microsoft, and TikTok and Amazon all use vulnerable pods, it's absolutely conceivable that thousands to millions of apps could have been exposed to exploitation of the vulnerability. What's wild is that the researchers actually discovered this when performing a red team exercise for a client, not through intentional examination of CocoaPods. So CocoaPods authenticates new devices using an email sent to users who request a session. The researchers noted, but authentication doesn't rely on anything but a client clicking their email address by clicking a link. It looks like the CocoaPods team has now patched the issues and actually appeared to do so months ago. The researchers wrote the vulnerabilities discovered in CocoaPods serve as an important reminder of the risks associated with relying on open source code and third-party dependencies, a message we've heard often in the last few years. With an estimated 97% of all commercial code bases believed to be utilizing open source components, that advice applies to pretty much everyone, not just CocoaPods. So yeah, another interesting kind of supply chain possible version. I find it a little bit clickbaity, this one.
Yes, a little, but the pervasiveness of CocoaPods is enormous. And so there is the possibility for exploitation. The story would have been stronger had there been some exploitation of it. So maybe this is more of like a success story of like, hey, yeah, this red team exercise found this thing before it could be widely attacked. But still, I think worth knowing. We are not vulnerable to this. We don't use CocoaPods at all. So there's nothing in 1Password for iOS or 1Password for Mac that makes use of CocoaPods. So we're in good shape.
I think I'm still like, I don't know if, maybe it's not all of our listeners. Maybe I'm different. This is, I'm going to expose myself. I don't really understand a lot of this. Like when I'm looking at this, like CocoaPods, like, so if I'm a developer and I'm making a new game on my thing, I use a CocoaPod to do something and then it ships and it's on phones and everything like that. But because it's just hey, are you here? Yeah, I'm here. And there's not a secure way to verify that I own that pod. If I just stop worrying about that game I created 6 years ago, someone else could do something and then turn around and make my game into something malicious.
I think it's slightly different than that, Sarah, where so CocoaPods provides a means for other software developers to create components that then other developers can use. So I'll use a bad example of like a calendar widget. Like if you are building an app and you want to put a calendar in it, and there's not a really good one like built into the native tool set provided by Apple, you'd be like, oh, well, there's this calendar CocoaPod. I'll just add this to my project, and boom, you now have a calendar you can use. The problem is that the ownership of that calendar component could be compromised, and malicious code could be added to the calendar without you knowing it, and without the provider knowing it, and it's just out in the world. Like there is a piece of the checks and balances system that was missing for CocoaPods in this way. Okay.
All right. That was, thank you, Rue.
You're welcome.
I understand now. I'm thinking Trojan horse style, Lego brick. It's just, it's a malicious Lego brick that I've added to my thing, and all of a sudden it's going to turn into Optimus Prime when I'm not looking.
100%. God, can you imagine? That'd be great. All right. Well, I hinted at this at the beginning of the episode. We have a great guest to kick off the new season today. So I'm excited to jump right into my interview with Joseph Cox because it truly was a fascinating story with lots of twists and turns. Let's not waste any more time and let's drop it in here. Hello, listeners. Joining me today is Joseph Cox. Joseph is a hacking, crime, and privacy journalist, fellow podcaster as the host of the 404 Media podcast, and author. His recent book, Dark Wire, The Incredible True Story of the Largest Sting Operation Ever, hit virtual and physical shelves last month and is quickly gathering critical and popular acclaim. Joseph, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really glad to be here.
Yeah, how are you doing? How have things been going since the book launch?
Very well. I'm glad that people are interested in this incredible story, that it's raising a bunch of questions from readers about what all this means for privacy and surveillance. But I still think there's a ton more to talk about, obviously not just in this conversation, but more broadly about what the book brings up. And I'm sure we're going to get into that.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to start by just giving listeners like a brief overview, maybe the dust jacket summary for a moment here?
Yeah, let me speed run the plot. In 2018, there was an encrypted messaging app that started to get popular among organized criminals. We're talking drug traffickers, hitmen, money launderers, smugglers, all of those sorts of people. Starts in Australia, gets popular in Europe, and they are using this app because it says it sends end-to-end encrypted messages, and explicitly, we're going to keep your communications out of the hands of law enforcement. But some weird stuff happens, some drug shipments get seized, some drug labs get raided, and eventually it turns out that Anom, the name of the app, was basically run by the FBI the entire time. It is an audacious and brazen operation in which the FBI ran its own tech company for organized crime.
That is unreal. That is it genuinely is an incredible story. I love this. First of all, like there's a movie plot here for sure, but also like it's just wicked fun to hear that the FBI went outside of the bounds of normal law enforcement to do something like this.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's a crazy story, right? And there's, of course, all these cybersecurity and encryption implications, but you can't ignore the fact that it's a true crime thriller on a literal global scale. You know, we're talking more than 100 countries with thousands upon thousands of devices and thousands upon thousands of criminals to extend that. It's like The Wire, basically, which of course is where I partly got the name from. It's like The Wire, but global, essentially. Which is still crazy to me, even though I wrote the book and I'm talking about it out loud. It's still unbelievable that this actually happened, in my opinion.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how do you even go from like nothing to having an app that has so effectively infiltrated a criminal underworld?
Yeah. So I guess to step back a little bit, there is this, what I call a shadow industry of encrypted phone firms. You know, most of us will get our phones from Apple or from Google or, you know, maybe a Samsung or whatever that still use Android hardware. Back in the day, maybe we got Blackberries. I could never afford that. That was always for like my much richer friends or people who I met. But around that time, companies started taking that hardware, especially Blackberries, and adding encrypted email software onto them. So you could send messages that would not be susceptible to a normal wiretap. They also took out the microphone, the camera, the GPS, and radically modified the device. You fast forward a little bit, these phones are very annoying to law enforcement, and the FBI shuts down a company called Phantom Secure. That was used by the Sinaloa drug cartel. It was used by biker gangs in Australia. It was a real heavy hitter of this industry. The FBI shuts them down. And then one thing becomes really, really clear after that act from the FBI. Oh, this gold rush of selling phones to organized criminals, maybe this is the end of it. Or maybe, you know, this is the start of the end of this industry. And in the wake of that, a person who calls himself AFGOO, AFGOO, who was selling phones for Phantom Secure and another company called Sky, they had been making what they called the next generation of encrypted phone. And that was, of course, a NOM. And they offered it to the FBI so they, you know, wouldn't face prosecution for charges they may or may not be lumped with in the future because of their involvement in the industry. And that's how the FBI basically has a NOM fall into its lap. You know, the FBI didn't go out and say, oh, let's make an encrypted phone company, at least initially. The idea came to them basically through this other person.
So this other person was just like, hey, look, like I've been dinged for doing some nefarious stuff in the past. I don't want to get dinged again. I've made this thing. Here it is.
Yeah, essentially. And I can't emphasize how much of an ace this is that AFGOO played. Like, if you imagine you are a criminal or even an encrypted phone seller, I guess, and you have information about one criminal gang, that's still going to be very, very valuable to law enforcement. And maybe you can provide that information to the FBI, or maybe they flip you and try to get you to get more information on a wider organization. That's all very well and good. That would still be a fantastic asset to the authorities. Here, AFGOO was offering to provide the technical infrastructure, the tech backbone, a very, very large slice of organized crime, rather than just one organization. I mean, I say that, but that would only work if anybody would actually buy the phones. And that obviously was not clear when the organization first started.
Right. So was Anom already in use by criminal organizations at this point, or was that a step that the FBI then had to get to?
It was exceptionally small at the start. It was more of a brainchild of AFGOO. I believe people had the devices, but it was on absolutely no sort of scale. It actually started, at least when the FBI got more involved, right, and it started to ramp up. AFGOO provided 5 phones, literally just 5, a handful, to a seller in Australia, and that person was Domenico Gattansarati. And Australian authorities allege they are connected to the Italian mafia in Australia. The mafia is really, really big in Australia when it comes to money laundering and drug trafficking and everything you would expect. And very quickly, the Australians see that, oh, everybody on this platform is using it 100% for crimes. And very quickly, word of mouth spreads and the phones become more popular in Australia. And that's a very, very key point in that you ask, well, did the FBI go out and sort of start selling it? The FBI says it never got hands-on with the actual selling of the phones themselves for a key reason, and that would be that they don't want to be called out for entrapment. It's one thing to have a nom organically spread among criminals and then you piggyback on the back door and you just listen to communications. It's another to deliberately approach somebody and be like, hey, do your crimes on this platform. And that could be very, very dicey. So that's why the FBI kind of let it just develop on its own. Now, they did interfere in some ways, and maybe we'll get into later with the stock of the phones and that sort of thing. But generally, it was a hands-off approach, both for the entrapment, or rather the avoidance of entrapment, but also when you're running an encrypted phone company for criminals, you want it to look like all of those other companies that cater to criminals, because you want the crooks to not be paranoid of your service. It has to look pretty legit, as legit as a drug trafficking phone company does.
Sure, yeah. Pretty illegitimate is what you want it to look like.
Yes.
Is what we're going. Okay, it starts to spread within the criminal networks and stuff like that. And it really revealed like some interconnectedness and efficiency of the criminal networks that the FBI wouldn't have had visibility into otherwise, right?
Yeah, I mean, a key thing about organized crime nowadays, not even this century, I'm talking like this decade, is that it is more globalized than ever. It no longer makes sense to talk about organized crime groups which just operate on their own turf. You now have to really talk about organized crime networks. So, maybe you'll have Albanians typically handling like distribution of a drug, and then they'll be in direct communication with the producers and all of that sort of thing. They don't operate in silos anymore. And what that means for the encrypted phone industry is that when the phones started to get a bit more popular in Australia, AFGU and Anon more widely would get these requests asking, hey, can you ship phones overseas? Because I have people there who also need these phones. And that especially happened, at least at first, in Europe. And Europe is not just a massive consumer of drugs now. I think it's actually overtaken the US for the consumption of cocaine. It's now actually becoming a massive producer of drugs as well, including amphetamine and methamphetamine. It has completely flipped from being a passive or a transit hub to being an epicenter of drug production. So you can totally see why people on Anom wanted to get phones over there as well. And that was sort of the next step in Anom's growth.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So let's flip a little bit to the book here, because it's one thing for this story to have happened. It's another thing to have been able to write an entire book about it. And I'm assuming that there's some intense investigative work that you had to do. There are some connections that you had to either develop or make use of here. Like, how do you even go about researching something like this?
I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This was the hardest journalistic investigation I've ever done, both in depth of terms of getting access to sources who had direct knowledge of what happened, the richness of the material they produced, and then also actually just the quantity, because of course for a 300-page book, you're not relying on one or two people. I spoke to essentially everybody from every part of the operation. So that includes FBI agents who worked directly on it. That's Australian law enforcement, European police officers as well, and then especially the criminal side. I spoke to drug traffickers who used the phones, who have used other encrypted phone devices as well, and people who sold Anom phones to organized criminals. And I also spoke to some of the people who coded the Anom app, who very, very crucially did not know they were working on a surveillance tool. All they understood was like, oh, we're making a nice little Android app that does end-to-end encryption and also archives the messages. That's what they thought the job was. They thought they were working for a company that then sold this app to, corporate clients who may need to audit their messages, may need to archive them. They had no idea that Anom was ending up in the hands of organized crime. So getting all of those sorts of people to talk is very, very difficult, obviously. But I had an advantage in that I've covered the encrypted phone industry, as I alluded to, since around 2016. I developed sources inside the companies themselves simply at first by emailing them and being like, hey, what's this crazy industry you're a part of? Because no journalist has actually done that before. From there, you meet the drug traffickers through various means, and then eventually, yes, you get access to law enforcement. And I've never been really one to write stories based on law enforcement sources. I'm very much an outsider. I'm very much an underdog. And I approach it from not the perspective of the criminals, because that would imply that I'm just telling their side of the story, but more like that's often how I get information. And that applies also to my coverage of ransomware or cybercrime more broadly. So I came through the criminal angle at first, but then for this book, you have to speak to everybody.
Yeah. Wow. Yes. And so at the end, like, this is a fairly well-balanced account. Any sensationalism that may exist here is probably not sensationalism, but rather the facts of the case, as wild as they may have been, but also covering it from so many different angles.
Yeah, I mean, you do not need sensationalism when you are doing this story because it's already crazy enough. And obviously, I would never introduce sensationalism anyway. But yeah, you do not need it. The truth is stranger than fiction. And when it comes to sort of the balanced approach, which is obviously what I always strive for, it's very funny because you will have more, let's say, privacy-leaning people read the book, activists, policymakers, even some journalists as well, and they'll read it and they will tell me, oh, wow, this is terrifying that the FBI went this far. This brings up all these really, really important questions. That's their sort of response to it. You then have more law enforcement-leaning people, either, cops themselves or people who are just close to that world, and they read it and they go, wow, this is totally sick. This is awesome. So I think that goes to show how balanced it is because both of those groups are having their own viewpoint on it. And I haven't come in with a particular slant. I just wanted to write a really, really good true crime book. Like, I love these sorts of things. I devour them constantly, whether that's a big Silicon Valley scam like the Theranos scandal or something closer to just a straight drug kingpin book. I wanted to write something like that. And as soon as I learned about the Anom operation, I was like, oh, okay, that's it. That's the book now.
Wow. Okay. So you touched on this a little bit just now. What were some of the key ethical boundaries and dilemmas that law enforcement faced during the sting operation? You mentioned earlier, not actually selling the phones or finding themselves in a position of entrapment, but I have to imagine that those boundaries were razor thin throughout this.
Yeah. I mean, there's a constant tension throughout the book and the operation, which is that when they do start to get intelligence from the Anom platform, and that's not just the FBI, but that's a ton of European partners who get involved and the Australians as well, very early on. There is this constant question of, well, what do we do with this intelligence? Do we act on it and do we go and seize this massive cocaine shipment? Do we raid this drug lab? Do we even potentially arrest this person? Now, ordinarily, those would be pretty straightforward considerations. Yeah, we're police officers. We go and grab the cocaine or whatever. But if you do too much activity or maybe a specific sort of raid that comes from information that the criminals were not suspecting to be out there, you are going to create, at minimum, paranoia among Anom's user base who may start to suspect the phones and then they ditch the platform altogether. Another way of putting it is that they just had to decide whether to burn the operation or not and what was worth doing it over that with that constant trade-off. And that was a decision, an ethical dilemma that these agents faced every single day. It's like, well, if we let that cocaine walk, that's tons of coke getting into Europe or Australia or wherever. If we seize it, we may cut off this basically once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to monitor the encrypted communications of organized criminals on a massive scale. So they did make shipments, they did stop the flow of drugs, but some people on the Anom platform absolutely, especially towards the end in around April and May 2021, did start to suspect the phones. One major ethical consideration connected to that is that it's one thing to decide whether to let the drugs walk, as they say. It's another when there are threats to life transmitted across the platform. And this is when somebody's going to be planning an assassination on a nom, which is a very common occurrence in the world of organized crime. Maybe they're going to torture somebody. Maybe they're going to kidnap somebody. And the agents saw this constantly. And in order to get approval, they had to promise higher ups at the DOJ, basically, whenever we detect a threat to life, we are going to act. We are going to warn the relevant authorities. We're going to try to do something. And they did do that in around 150 cases, they said, which is a great success. The operation wasn't entirely burned, but with that being said, I reveal in the book that at least one person did die because of an assassination that was fully planned on a nom. So that is following the target, that's sourcing the weapon, that's discussing where to lure the target to, and that's even celebrating about the murder afterwards, where they're typing ha 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 into the anom chats. And the fact of the matter is that was planned on the FBI's own app.
Yeah. Wow. There is a side of this that is, on the surface of it, I don't think is probably realized, and certainly not if you go back to the beginning of our conversation, but the toll on the law enforcement agents themselves of having to see some things and having to navigate these very tricky ethical dilemmas in order to, constantly considering the greater good, you're considering threats to life and everything else, and even wrestling with the fact that, are you enabling things in the process of trying to stop them? Like, I'm sure that there are some very, very difficult personal demons that some of these folks are wrestling with now. Okay, so we've talked about some of the successes. We've talked about some of the near misses. Are there any other, really some highlights from this story that you wanted to call out?
I think it would be mostly, there is a character called Microsoft in the book. No relation to the tech giant, obviously. I don't have to say that for legal reasons, but I think it's funny to say, not the same for legal reasons. His real name is Maximilian Rifkin. He's a Serbian, I think, born gangster, Swedish nationality, eventually moves to Turkey, and he gets onto a nom, and he's very important for the phone company's growth. And just the episode I want to highlight is that when the Swedish authorities get access to the data, they decide to raid an amphetamine lab of his that he is managing inside the Swedish countryside. They had no idea about this criminal organization before they got onto a nom, as in the Swedish officials had no idea. They raid it. That's a great success. They seize nearly, I think, a ton of amphetamine, or the lab is able to produce that much. And that starts a long downward spiral for Microsoft, where more and more of his drug shipments are seized, and he has no idea why. He thinks, at least potentially, that it's people he's worked with. Maybe, somebody was a rat. Maybe one of them was using a phone from Sky, one of these other encrypted phone companies, and he just doesn't know. It's a nom the entire time. I won't spoil every up and down of his arc, but it was just incredible to be able to read tens of thousands of anon messages across hundreds of thousands of pages of police reports that I've obtained, and I feel like I'm in this guy's mind. I get so used to what he does, as in he will compliment his colleagues or associates at one point, and then he will flip and he will threaten to kill them. He hires hitmen. He's all over the place, which sounds very unpredictable, but I read so many messages of his that I could figure out, Microsoft's not going to like this, and I'm reading my own true crime book by just reading the anon messages, and then I have to figure out how to put it into my book.
Sure. Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
So the operation ended. It is now concluded and ended spectacularly. Can you walk through how it all came to an end and the aftermath for both law enforcement and the criminal world?
So the FBI in early 2021, they're coming towards the spring and the summer, they have a bit of a problem. A nom is basically too successful, and they do start to lose control of the platform. The FBI would push back against that. They would say, we could turn it off whenever we want. But the fact of the matter was that distribution of the phones was now in control, actually, of Microsoft and another very top-tier drug trafficker called Agony Aunt. They were making the phones whenever they wished. They were giving them to whoever they wanted. And one of the FBI agents involved was saying, we can't do this. It's getting too big. It's going to collapse. So they have that issue. And then also the court order that legalized the operation was going to expire anyway in around June 2021. So then that's when they decide to wrap it all up. 7th of June 2021 is going to be the big day. And the way they do that is by following the sun. So it starts in Australia, and I think late night, actually the day before / early morning, the Australian authorities, the AFP, the federal police and the state agencies, they do a bunch of raids, and they kick off the first line of dominoes, or the first dominoes in that line, which is then stretching across to Europe when the day continues and the sun moves over there. And European officials start arresting people as well. I have some really dramatic scenes in the book where they're in Europol, which is sort of the European Union's law enforcement main coordination body, and cops are shouting at each other face to face, being like, oh, this guy just fled from Sweden in the car, now he's in the Netherlands, now he's in another country, and they're doing live collaboration, just in the same sort of way that criminals are doing live collaboration as well, to try and stay one step ahead. They bust a bunch of people as well, until eventually the sun moves to the west coast in the US, and the prosecutors and the FBI in San Diego, they come forward and they clarify, we've been running a NOM the entire time. This was not an ordinary phone company. We've been managing it, and we've been getting all of the messages. And obviously that drops like a grenade among the organized criminal community, not just Anom users themselves, who are now in really, really big trouble, obviously, but the wider underground, because of a very, very key point. The FBI, as was its goal, has now shattered the trust in the encrypted phone industry. They wanted to do this. They didn't just want to arrest people. They wanted criminals to doubt whether they could even trust these encrypted phones in the first place, so then maybe they would go back to more old school techniques that perhaps the FBI could surveil better. I don't know, social media, ordinary phones, even face-to-face meetings, but not the end-to-end encryption. And generally, the FBI has been pretty successful at that, I would say.
That's a fascinating outcome, just to be able to like instill that fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and probably be able to continue to capitalize on that since then, right? I'm assuming that they could probably leak to say like, oh, hey, like this encrypted phone provider, that's a sting operation from Interpol, or like, you know, they could start to seed that doubt and feed it more and more.
Yeah, and even if they don't, the paranoia is still going to be there. Like, after the FBI came clean, I was speaking to an encrypted phone seller from Europe, and they said it's basically impossible to build a customer base now, because all of the users are just thinking, well, what's to say the FBI isn't behind this one as well? Or maybe it's the Australians this time, or maybe it's the Dutch, like, who knows? They've been absolutely successful at that. That's not to say that the encrypted phone industry is like entirely dead. There's still a few, but more and more criminals, at least, you know, the ones I've spoken to or the ones I've heard about, are moving to consumer platforms like Signal that we all use. And that brings up, obviously, a very key question, which I deliberately do not answer in the book because I don't think it's my place. I think this is for people in InfoSec, cybersecurity, privacy, lawmakers, whoever, to discuss now, which is, well, what happens when more criminals move to a platform that's used by all of us for privacy? Will the FBI then do some sort of operation on that as well? And I'm not trying to imply that Signal is compromised in any sort of way. I use it every single day and I trust it with my security. But the FBI isn't just going to go home and be like, oh, we did a NOM, that was great, okay, now we can retire. It's what happens now, which I think we need to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. Considering your career as a journalist and reporting on hacking and privacy in the past, did completing the book change your views or your perspective on the cybersecurity landscape?
I think it changed. Well, maybe not changed, because I've been covering surveillance and privacy for a long time, right? I've been covering how the FBI will use hacking tools or network investigative techniques in either a targeted fashion or in a very, very broad fashion, where they hack all of the users of a single site. And this brings up all sorts of issues of legality, proportionality, all of those sorts of things. But I think what it did evolve my viewpoint on, or sort of crystallize, is that I see sort of 3 different ways forward when it comes to encryption and data access and I guess cybersecurity of these platforms. And the first is, the front door, which is companies give data to the authorities under a legal order. Discord does this all the time. Twitter, obviously, Facebook, whatever. The very, very normal, we send you a subpoena or a search warrant, depending what the data is. There's all of that. Well, for encrypted communications platforms, that would introduce a vulnerability. If Signal just provided a copy of the messages, I don't think people would like that, and it would have ramifications. The second is that, well, if you're not going to do that, maybe the FBI is going to do these really, really large-scale operations where they secretly run a tech company for organized crime. Maybe people are okay with that, or maybe people are not, but we haven't had that discussion yet. To be clear, I think the Anom operation is a consequence of companies not providing data to law enforcement, right? I'm not saying whether that's good or bad, but that is the chronology of what happened. In this case, it was these sketchy encrypted phone companies that work for organized crime, but it could easily be a Telegram or a Signal next. Then the third option, and the one which I probably lean towards out of those options, is the targeted hacking that I mentioned. You get a warrant or a narrow legal order to collect a narrow piece of information about a specific user from a specific device. If those are the three options, that seems like the worst out of all of them. And I'm not necessarily advocating for it. I'm just trying to figure out that, well, I think some people in cybersecurity, infosec, or privacy will just tell the cops, well, police harder. Okay, when they do that, you get a nom. You know what I mean? And that is the consequence of that. I just don't think the status quo is sustainable, and we need to collectively at least discuss what we're going to do, because otherwise the FBI and its partners are going to launch these massive operations, and they didn't ask to do a nom, obviously, but they're going to go and do it.
Yeah, you can't help but do so, especially being as steeped in it as you have been, and especially with the volume of information that you were able to go through and then distill down to the book. Like, at this point, Joseph, you have probably just as much to say from a knowledgeable and well-formed, opinionated stance as anyone in the industry.
Yeah, and I don't take that lightly, but that's also what some people who I've spoken to in the book have said. Like, one of the prosecutors, Andrew Young, who was sort of the legal architect of this, I mean, he's told me, you probably understand the operation better than anybody, because not only have I spoken to the FBI and those people there, but as I said, I've spoken to the drug traffickers and I've spoken to the encrypted phone sellers, who are obviously, let's say, not going to be as open with the FBI.
Sure.
And I have the privilege of being on the outside, where I can gather all of this information, I can verify it, and I can now publish it for everybody else to read. And I think that's really important, because the going dark debate in InfoSec and cybersecurity and privacy, it's developed a lot over the past decade. But a lot of the discussion is just in hypotheticals. It's very, very speculative, and, well, now we have the answer to what happens when the FBI does get a backdoor into an encryption product. Now we just need to, read the book and then talk about it, because I can't tell you everything in a podcast, obviously. So
sure.
I just really, really hope that we can have that conversation more. And that was really the overarching goal here. It's like, this is the case study for InfoSec and for privacy.
Yeah. Wow, it's incredible. So I feel in some ways, Joseph, and I'm curious if you've had these thoughts yourself, this almost feels like a great musical artist whose first album also ends up being their greatest hits. Do you feel that way with this book, sort of starting at the top, and are you already looking for your next subject to write on?
Yeah, I do basically feel like that, but this book was, as I've said, years in the making. And sort of as you allude to, it's the culmination of nearly 10 years of reporting inside the encrypted phone industry. I will, of course, keep a very, very close eye on the industry. If authorities try to shut down another company, or of course I'm going to cover that, because I'm in a position to, and I'm just constantly fascinated by it. Never say never, because somebody would dig up the podcast and then point it at me and be like, hey, you said you weren't going to do it. But right now, I don't see myself doing another book, because I was just so obsessed with this story. It's the singular story in my entire life which I've simply cared most about. And it requires so much passion and energy to write a book that I just don't think I care about anything as much as I do about this. So the book would be bad if I did another one. Is what I'm trying. Oh, now someone's going to dig that up. Now I said that as well.
Yeah, I promise I wasn't trying to trap
No,
you.
that was totally my bad. I totally walked into that. But you can see the point I'm trying to make is like, this was the story. And look, mate, hey, if the FBI then does the largest sting operation again, but somehow even bigger, yeah, sure, I'll cover that. But I don't know. They haven't done that yet. So.
That's fair. Well, in that case, like, I think it's probably time to start working on the screenplay, getting some options out to Hollywood, and then you can just retire. Like that's how this story ends. I think, Joseph, is this you parlay this into incredible successful heights and then just retire on a beach.
Well, here's hoping, but I would get pulled in by something for sure. That it may not be a book, but that's journalism, man. It really pulls you right back in.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, why don't we wrap up for today? Where can folks go to learn more about you, the 404 Media podcast, or to buy the book?
Yeah, so if you enjoy listening to my weird British BBC voice and my rambling, and you want to hear more from my co-founders of 404 Media, you can search for the 404 Media podcast. It's everywhere you might expect. And what we do is that we talk about free stories that we publish that week. They're always original reporting. We don't talk about other people's stories. So you literally cannot get what we talk about anywhere else. So just search for the 404 Media podcast. If you want the articles themselves, you go to 404media.co. And as for the book, yes, just search for Darkwire. It's on Amazon, wherever books are sold. And I really, really hope more people get to read this story, because I do genuinely think it's an important case study for InfoSec. I'm not just saying that. I think this is a real chance for us to have a new debate about privacy, cybersecurity, encryption, and all of that.
Wonderful. Joseph, this has been an absolute delight. Thank you for taking the time to come on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the conversation.
So, we have a new segment, a new Agony Aunt segment, where you can ask Rue anything. Do we have a jingle for this?
I don't think we have a jingle.
So.
We don't have a jingle for this. Anna's just popped in and it says Anna isn't being recorded. Okay, we need an instant jingle for this. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm hearing from the producer that no, we don't. Sorry, no, we don't have a jingle. Jesus, what is this?
Oh no!
This just in.
I think this could work as a jingle.
It's Rue with an opinion.
We don't have copyright to play any more of that, I'm afraid.
That's okay. That was AI generated. We don't need copyright.
So this is a segment where users can write you a letter and we read it out.
Why? Why me?
Because you're Agony Rue.
Because you know stuff.
Oh.
I think the jingle when it comes out will be something like Agony Rue, what would he do? It'll rhyme. It'll be great.
Look at how you just explained Cocoa Pods to me. I understood that. If I didn't know better, I would think that was a plant.
All right,
and
well,
I'm just that good.
Let's try it, I guess.
Okay, so we have the first letter from a user. You can actually send agony letters to Aunt Rue.
Why am I an ant?
Please send your questions or letters to podcast@onepassword.com. It can be anything you would like us to answer on the show. It's probably better if it contains some element of cybersecurity, but we will read them out regardless. Our bar is really low. You can include your name or specify if you would like to remain anonymous. Why not? If you have like voice memos on your phone or something, you can also send us the audio.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, so this one goes, G'day Rue.
Oh, do we have an Aussie?
Oh, I wonder whether he thought your name was Australian because your name is Rue, or whether he's Australian or they're Australian. I don't know.
I'm going to go with they're Australian. I have a lot of affinity for Australians, so let's go.
Should I read it in an Australian accent?
Yes.
G'day Rue. Oh, that was quite good actually.
God, that was good. You shouldn't go any further.
G'day Rue. What computer setups do you and the hosts have?
I think this is incredible. I didn't know. Wow, keep going. I love it.
Apart from one... No, I can't do it. Apart from 1Password, what other security programs do you use? There are so many security services out there and so little time and energy to set which one's up. I end up in a state of decision paralysis and I don't know where to begin, Send help.
Well, listen, my fine Australian friend. So what computer setups do I use? I have in the house.
This is where you tell us you have like 50 like Mac Minis, right? Each light bulb is run by a Mac Mini.
Yeah, so I have 4 Macs, I guess.
Is that more
Macs.
than bathrooms? You have more Macs than
I have
bathrooms.
more Macs than bathrooms. 1 Mac per bathroom and then 2 extra.
Nice.
And let's see, I've got 5 iPhones, a number of iPads, 4 Apple TVs. Like, it's a lot. And then PlayStations and, yes, a whole bunch of HomeKit enabled devices and things like that. I don't really use any other security software. I use what is baked into the operating system, and that's about it. I don't have a huge need.
Really?
Yes.
Do you not have any like weird, Raspberry Pis just running random stuff?
Nope.
No.
Nope, because I don't want to.
I use NextDNS. This is my big security ad. Is NextDNS. Basically, it's a DNS server, but you can add like block lists and allow lists to it, and it also like helps you log all of the DNS requests as well. So if you plug in a light bulb for the first time and it's like a smart light bulb, I will open NextDNS and I will run a log while I'm doing that, and then look at all the places that it calls and be like,
interesting.
Nah, mate.
Interesting.
And this one is huge for me. Rooston, one of the founders, put me on to something called Pi-hole, which you're supposed to run on like a Raspberry Pi.
I did this for a time, yeah.
Yeah, I did that as well. But then I realized I don't like the fact that I have to update that all the time, and I will forget because it's small and it's out the way.
Correct.
So NextDNS is like that, but as a server. And it's pretty cheap. I like it. I think it's like $20 for the year.
Yeah. So I was running my own DNS server for a time for the same reasons. Like, I wanted to sort of like keep... basically, I was blocking ads with it.
I block ads too, yeah.
But then same thing, like, one, when there was a power outage at the house or other flaky network things, Carrie and the kids would not be able to get to websites, and they got annoyed. And I was like, yeah, this is dumb.
So you had to reboot the Raspberry Pi?
Yes.
In order for the internet to work? Okay.
Yeah, it was dumb. I was like, this sucks. But there are DNS servers out there that are public and well vetted that do this same thing. So I just set my DNS servers to these external services. So I guess you could say that that's one that I use, but I don't use it for like monitoring and like blocking, stuff like that. But otherwise, like, no, just whatever comes in the OS is pretty good. Apple's pretty good about, and also like this is a pure Apple household. Like, I don't have any Android devices or anything like that, no Windows computers or anything. So my answer may be different if I wanted to try out some of that stuff. But as it is, like, Apple does a really great job of keeping us safe. So I'm pretty happy.
When you buy like a new fridge or a new smart dishwasher or like a smart washing machine or any of this stuff, do you not? You just like...
No.
I bought a washing machine and it was pinging everything. You couldn't turn the Wi-Fi off. And when it went wrong, I had to connect it to my Wi-Fi because otherwise they wouldn't service it. Because they were like, okay, we need to verify that there is actually something wrong, so we're going to talk directly to the washing machine.
Yep.
I plugged it in, it pinged 700 domains.
Whoa.
Yeah. My washer dryer they're 15 plus years old, and their smart connection is you call a service number and then you hold it up to the washing machine, and it uses modem style like beeps and bloops to communicate.
Yes.
It's really cool. I haven't actually used it, but I think it's really neat.
Mine does that too.
Yeah.
It's got an app that reads it as well. So like it'll do a little like cry for help, but it's it's like, it's enabled with something, and then you hold the app up to that and it goes, yeah, this is the problem.
Yeah. If I have the chance to buy, like when I have the chance to buy something, I buy the dumbest version I possibly can, unless I specifically want a smart device. So like our fridge, it's a fridge. You plug it in. Like it doesn't need to connect to the internet.
I think like the number of dumb things that you can buy these days is like going massively down though. Like I don't think you can get a TV without like all kinds of like smart software that needs all this and that, and
the TV is so frustrating.
And I keep the Wi-Fi off on our TV.
My TV has a problem where I will close like the app on the TV and it will default to the Safari channel. And It's so annoying because I will forget that it does it. I will hit the exit button thinking that it turns off the TV, and instead it defaults to the Safari channel. And so I'll be halfway down the stairs, and then it will, like, you know, I'll just hear some South African loudly telling me about a lion that's, you know, about to eat something. And it's really gruesome as well.
And what do they sound like, Matt?
I'm not going to do an Australian and a South African.
Come on.
You almost had him.
If you are writing a letter in and you do put in brackets, I am from this place, I will attempt to do more accents.
Will you speak in French, though, is the real question.
You know, if you write your letter in French, I will attempt to read it out in French.
Nice.
All right. So that is our new segment. Please do drop us an email. Do we play the jingle on the way out as well?
Nope. We move on to Password Panic.
Okay.
Yes.
So, welcome to Password Panic, the new game. This is a fast-paced, memory-testing trivia game. Here, our hosts have to answer a number of general knowledge questions to create one long password, but there's a catch. When answering each question, they must remember and recall all the previous answers in one long list to create a complex password. Hosts must race to buzz in when they want to answer. So, this is a test of knowledge and memory. For fun, the passwords recalled by the host are entered into one password at the end to determine how strong it is. So ultimately, Password Panic will likely prove why we need a password manager because our memory sucks. We also have a brand new jingle.
Another jingle? We're a little jingle heavy. This new season is a little jingle happy.
It's Christmas in July.
Password panic. I hope you did your homework, hope you came prepared, hope you buckled down and practiced. Cause when the pressure starts to mount and your memory gives out, it'll hardly even matter that you buzzed the fastest. Answer quick, recall the list, and only time will show how the competition in this edition of Password Panic will go.
We're not going to comment on the jingle because we want to let our users listen to it first and let them have that first impression without us and our opinions biasing
Right.
anything.
Okay.
See?
So, I'm hosting.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Let's go.
Okay. Question number 1. Which planet is known as the Red Planet?
Bing.
That was Rue.
Mars.
Mars, yes. So, instead of La La Land, which movie actually won the Oscar for Best Picture in 2017?
Bing. It's, Mars. Moonlight.
Ooh, Rue's on a roll. Okay, so in which year did World War II end?
Bidoo.
That's Sarah.
Ooh.
Mars, Moonlight, 1945.
Yes. What is the main ingredient in traditional guacamole?
Bing.
Rue.
Mars, Moonlight, 1945, avocado.
Yes. What is the symbol for the element potassium?
Bidoo.
That was Sarah.
Mars, Moonlight, 1945, avocados,
I love it.
and K. Capital K.
Okay, yes. What is the capital of Australia?
Nope.
Bidoo.
Sarah.
Mars, Moonlight, 1945, avocados, K, Canberra.
Yes.
Oh, well done.
Well done.
I remember that from the previous not remembering.
What punctuation mark is sometimes used to censor or partially hide a word?
Bidoo.
Sarah.
Mars, Moonlight, 1945, avocados. I can't not say it right now. K, Canberra. And then the answer we're looking for right now, which is the question that you just asked. Asterisk.
Wow.
Yes. So, next. How many hearts does an octopus have?
Bing.
Go.
Oh, hearts. Oh my God.
Tentacles.
I'm completely thrown off, though, because Sawyer and I were just talking about this the other day. They have 9 brains. Oh, no. Wait, what was the first answer? Oh my God, this has totally thrown me. It's, oh no.
Yeah, I think we have to time you out.
I think that's it. I can't believe that I totally dropped the ball in this one. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, Sarah, do you have any idea?
I don't know. I know how many stomachs a cow has. I know I'm gonna guess, and I don't know the right answer, but we're at Mars, Moonlight, 1945, Avocados, K, Canberra, Asterisk, and then 2?
Oh, it has 3 hearts.
3, okay. I didn't know how many hearts.
Well, Sarah's still the winner.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. No, I tanked that one. Well done, Sarah. Great job.
That
was excellent.
I'm shocked.
All right, we have Mars, Moonlight.
Are you doing this on the iOS app, not the Mac app?
No, on the Mac app. On the app that runs on Mac. Mars, Moonlight, 1945. K, Avocado, K, 1945. Canberra, ass. Oh, I'm going to do it as the symbol. There we go. 3. Save.
Oh, you're doing it like that. Okay, I get it.
Yes. You know, the strength does come back as fantastic. Matt,
Yeah?
that is still a randomly generated password. We just went about it in an odd manner.
So there we go. All right. I mean, Sarah's got 2 minutes till she's live on stage,
Yes.
so we better let her run. Love you both.
Love you both.
Love you both. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. If you're enjoying the show, we'd love it if you could subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also leave us a rating or review. It's one of the best ways to support Random But Memorable, and we always love reading your feedback. We're also a community-led podcast, so if you have any questions for us, topics, requests, or even guests you want to hear from, please send us an email at podcast@onepastors.com. We read all your comments and look forward to hearing from you. We hope you join us in the next episode for plenty more random moments in the world of cybersecurity.